Good evening, and welcome to this special meeting of Westminster's Mayor and Common Council. During the public health emergency, we will be conducting our meetings virtually, and they will be available and streamed live on the city's Facebook page, as well as the Community Media Center channel and website. Copies of tonight's agenda and the entire information packet that the council will be using are available online on the city's website. Tonight on our agenda, we have no unfinished business of which I'm aware. Is there any unfinished business? Seeing none, we'll move on. We have one item of new business, and it's the purpose of this special meeting. Tonight, we'll be having a discussion with Pannoni Associates Incorporated regarding the master plan development for Wakefield Valley Park. And we'll begin by turning to Ms. Gruber, our Director of Parks and Recreation.
Good evening. Yes. On September 14th, as you are aware, a contract was awarded to Pannoni Associates Incorporated to assist with the development of a master plan for Wakefield Valley Park. The master plan will provide a foundation for the future phase development of the property so that it can serve as a cornerstone of the city's park system. It is also intended to lay the groundwork for city grant applications and capital funding requests to finance future park development and improvements. The scope of the work to be performed by Pannoni Associates includes gathering input from a variety of sources. Considerable emphasis was placed on obtaining widespread community feedback. The initial step in the information gathering process was a kickoff meeting with city staff, which was held on October 22nd. The city administrator and representatives from the Recreation and Parks Department and Public Works Department participated in this kickoff meeting. During the meeting, relevant site information was exchanged and a project timeline and schedule was developed. The special meeting this evening will provide the elected body with the opportunity to share its thoughts about the future use of Wakefield Valley Park. So with that said, I'd like to turn the agenda over to Mr. Stone from Pannoni and Associates, as he has a presentation this evening.
Thanks, Abby.
Mr. Stone, welcome.
Thank you. Very happy to be here. I wanted to share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
We can.
So my presentation is relatively brief. The main point of the meeting, like Abby said, is to start gathering your input on the park itself, the site. We've done a couple of things, like Abby mentioned. We did have a kickoff meeting. We've started putting together some maps, just documenting the existing conditions. And we've conducted a couple of site visits. And this is I'm really impressed with this site. It's just a really, really neat piece of property. It's got all kinds of opportunities for you all, for your rec and park system, and just as an open space in the city. It's a pretty amazing site. And the project schedule that Abby started to talk about. So we've tentatively got a first public presentation set for December 16th. In between now and then, we'll be getting your input and then starting to kind of do some analysis and put together some initial very preliminary plans that we'll then continue to refine as we go through the process and hopefully present a final master plan sometime in the beginning of March. The site itself, I mean, I'm assuming you're all very familiar with the site. It's an old golf course, really, really neat site. I got to spend an afternoon out there last week with a couple of my staff and just really impressed with the site. We started to put together some thoughts on possible goals for the master plan, just in discussion with Rec and Parks and our thinking about the site. And as I kind of go through this, I'd love to get, maybe not right this second, but love to get your input on the kind of other goals, other big picture things that should be considered as we look at this site. There's 5 basic ones that we're really looking at. Passive park development is kind of that's something I'll touch on later on in the presentation, but that was something that we heard in talking with staff that was important for the site. Access to the site's obviously important, both vehicular access and then pedestrian access. So how does the master plan deal with that? How do we improve that? Going along with access is just connectivity. How do you connect to the adjacent neighborhoods? How do you connect to other trails that are near the site? I know there's the Wakefield Valley Trail, and connection to that was a big part of the RFP. And then looking at the site itself, how do you restore it? Whether that's restoring the historic structure, restoring the natural areas of the site, and then looking at the history of the site. How do you use the site to kind of tell the story of what's going on the site itself, and then in the surrounding community in the city of Westminster. It's an interesting site from a historic perspective. We've had a chance to read through some of the old documents, some of the Maryland Historic Trust documents. So you've got a really old structure there, but it's kind of, even before that structure was there was stuff going on the site. So how do you use this master plan to kind of tell that story? And then look at the more recent history with the golf course, the surrounding community, and then the park now. So as we go through the master plan, we're looking at, I mentioned a bunch of maps that we're putting together. So we're trying to document just the existing conditions. So where's the stream on the site? And there's a floodplain associated with the stream. There's a stream buffer. There's potential wetland areas. There's some steeply sloped areas on the site that really aren't suitable for a lot of development. There's a lot of elevation relief on the site, high points and low points. How do you kind of document all that stuff so that then you can set up a master plan to take advantage of the opportunities that those things present? We also look at things like the existing development and what's already developed on the site. There's some utility corridors that run through the site itself, so those things need to be considered in the master plan. This is kind of an example of some site analysis. So this is an aerial photo of the site. The red line is the limits of the property. The parking area is shown up in this area with the clubhouse and the Durbin House next to it. This blue area is the floodplain. That's the 100-year floodplain that the state's mapped. So we can overlay that, and that kind of tells us, well, that's an area that's really not suitable for a lot of development. You maybe have trails going through there, but you're not going to be looking at structures or things like that in that area. So as we start to do these overlays, we can kind of see what areas of the site are available for different types of development. And when we're looking at the park, we kind of breaking stuff down into linear activities and non-linear activities. So the linear activities would be things like trails, walking paths, bike paths, like you have on the site today. There's a lot of those linear type activities. Non-linear activities are things that require kind of a larger area where you might have a larger group of people gathering. So things like lawns, big open areas, playgrounds, pavilions, those types of things. The parking lot and the clubhouses, those are kind of non-linear type activities. So when we're looking at the master plan, we can kind of break stuff down into linear and non-linear activities as we look at the site, because with a site like this, there's going to be those areas that are more suitable for non-linear where you need a larger area, and then there's areas where you really just need that small corridor. We've looked at a number of similar parks, and you'll hear the phrase passive park as I go through this. And when I say passive park, I'm not talking about just an area of woods or something where nothing's going on, but we're talking about a passive park versus an active park. So an active park would be one where there's a lot more program space as far as ball fields and things where you may have a lot of people gathering together, and it tends to be fairly intense uses. Passive park doesn't necessarily mean that there's no gathering spaces, but the uses are more oriented towards kind of individuals or small groups using things like trails or just spending time in the outdoors, taking advantage of the open space versus that heavily programmed activity like a ball field. So I've listed a number of parks here. There's some of them are Carroll County. There's a number in Anne Arundel County. We do a lot of work in Anne Arundel County at the moment. And then a couple of big parks, Central Park, New York. I mean, that's a huge park, obviously, and it's got a lot of passive type spaces in it. It does have some of those active spaces as well, but a lot of these parks do tend to combine some of the active and passive spaces, especially some of the larger ones. But I think this site in particular has got a lot of opportunity for those passive type activities. We could talk about the active type activities. It's could be challenging on this site, just given the topography and the environmental features like floodplains and things like that. And then the last item that I really have in the presentation before I kind of, and this is kind of where I'll transition over into getting your input, unless Abby or Barb has anything else. But we started to put together a list of different types of activities that you might find in a passive park. And I broke these up just for our purposes tonight into this linear and nonlinear activities. So there's a lot of activities that could go on in a park, and this isn't an exhaustive list by any means. And I'd love to hear other folks' ideas. These are just some ideas we came up with in the office of different types of activities that could happen on this site in particular. So I'm happy to get thoughts, input, answer questions, give you all additional information, but love to hear what you all think and what your ideas are.
Thank you. Ms. Gruber, did you want to add anything to this before we start hearing from the council members?
I don't have anything to add. I'm excited to gain feedback from council.
Okay, great, thanks. So we'll go ahead and start the conversation. We've all heard the presentation. Perhaps, so we'll see who wants to be heard. Mr. Dayoff, as you're chair of the Recreational Parks Committee, did you have any thoughts you wanted to start off with?
No, I appreciated the presentation, and I think I'll be curious to see what some of the thoughts are of my colleagues. I think we're in the correct direction with a lot of this, though, and I really appreciate it. The one thing that I keep being preoccupied with Wakefield Valley is I have a concept of not necessarily the open space, but I would look forward to making something productive out of the old conference center and the Durbin House. And I think one of the ideas that I've thought about with the conference center, and I've discussed it with some other folks, is maybe perhaps leasing it for a year for 25 years or 35 years or whatever it would take, maybe for $1 a year, and see if somebody can't redevelop it and bring it back into a productive use. The balance of the park, though, I feel very strongly about it remaining in park use, and maybe we could look forward to. I know a lot of folks have been very much interested in maybe some baseball diamonds and some things like that, and I'm up for that discussion. I'm willing for folks to make their case about that. I guess that's it for right now. Let's see what some of our colleagues come up with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dayoff. Anyone else
Yeah,
have
Mr.
any
President,
thoughts?
I'm happy to go.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Cavacci.
So I believe the first, well, I want to get a couple housekeeping things out of the way first. So, I think Councilman Pecoraro, I can't remember. Were you on the council when we actually acquired the property?
I was not. You are the
I didn't
only
think so.
member
So
still with us.
Yeah, so I'm the only one that was, and myself and the former council president and the former mayor did really the bulk of the heavy lifting in the negotiation, the whole putting together of the acquisition of the property. And I played probably a pretty heavy role in working with the developer that got the property and the whole 9 yards. We don't need to rehash all that, but there was a lot of thought put into how important it was for us to acquire this piece of property when we realized when we were able to put a deal together. We really jumped on it to make it happen. And I'm still under the belief that it was probably, for me personally, when I leave office eventually, I'll probably look back on it. It'll probably be the single greatest thing that I did in my entire tenure as an elected official. I hope. But at the end of the day, I do want to do one housekeeping thing. I noticed when you had the map up, you had the red line drawn, and I'm speaking to Mr. Stone. Can you bring that map back up that showed the boundary line, please? Of the
I think we've got it up, Mr. Cavacci.
Is that it right there? Okay, it just came up on mine. Okay, so when you go over towards Carroll Lutheran Village, you see two groves of trees right there. Above that is the property that Richard Kress kept for himself for some future use, potentially maybe putting some homes on there. And there's been some movement towards that at one point, but there was a denial of a zoning request to do the density level that he wanted to do. And I think maybe down the road we'll probably see something else from them in terms of putting some homes up there above that, outside of the red boundary there. It's his property, and I believe he's got 50, 60 acres there. What I'm not seeing is is supposed to be a 15-acre buffer area that is going to be owned or either is or will be owned by Carroll Lutheran Village. So where is that part of the property?
So the Carroll Lutheran Village is over here, and hopefully everybody can see my little cursor.
Yeah.
I cannot.
It's a hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me actually give me a second. I will bring this up in another program. I can draw. And...
Well, maybe you can just tell us. There's two groves of trees over to the far left of the screen, right?
Correct.
It's above that.
Yep. Yeah. So there's two parcels that we've looked at a record plat. There's like a parcel X and a parcel Y or something like that. So
right. Okay.
That parcel, this is the area that I think was supposed to go or did go to Carroll Lutheran Village. That. And
yeah, it's not where I don't see it. I can't see what you're pointing at.
Okay. Yeah, so correct. I know what you're saying, and there were two parcels. One, I think in the conversation with staff, there's one that was indicated to go to Carroll Lutheran Village. Our research into the tax records, just as a preliminary matter, has shown that both these two parcels are owned by, I guess, the developers.
That's correct. I don't believe that transfer has actually taken place yet to Carroll Lutheran Village. I just want to make sure I don't want any of our planning to include any of the property that's not ours. That's all I wanted to be safe of, was to make sure I wanted to make sure how it abuts right up there along that row of homes, that none of that was part of that property that was supposed to be going over to Carroll Lutheran Village. And we're sure it's not, correct?
Yeah, I think we're on the same page as far as.
Okay, awesome. I just wanted to make sure, because I knew that hadn't actually transferred yet, so I wanted to make sure we weren't trying to account for it. So, are you familiar with the background of the first attempt at looking to do some things on that property? Did you know the background of the group that was put together and the idea they put forth?
Yeah, I did a little bit of reading, both
Okay.
as we've done the master planning, and then when we were putting together our proposal, I did some of the background reading.
Okay, good. Well, one of the things I'm sure if you read about it, you probably picked up on right away was the surrounding community was pretty strongly opposed to a uber active property. They were, pretty vocal when we had some public meetings about that property not becoming what was originally proposed by the first group, which was a for-profit entity coming in and running a facility out of there that was going to draw, probably a pretty fair amount of people on a consistent, ongoing basis. There was a water park. There were 4 turf fields. There was going to be activity in the buildings, and I think there was a ton of pushback from the surrounding community regarding the impact that would have on their daily lives. So, and I'm only going to speak for myself. I won't speak for anyone else. They can do that. But, I think that was the wrong direction to go in. And we moved away from that. That was just too active. However, I know in my conversations with numerous folks that live around the park, they're not opposed to it being somewhat of an active facility as long as it's local. So it being purely passive, I don't personally think that's the highest, best use of the property. I love what it is right now and hope that it mostly stays that way. But there are places where some multi-purpose fields, grass multi-purpose fields, might make sense. And there's some fairways out there that are already relatively flat, that are relatively accessible. So I'm hoping we'll at least be able to look at that. Again, I'm talking about a usage that's local for local kids, not for a profit driven entity, and not a high constant, volume of usage year round. We're talking about, usage similar to some of the other parks that we have around, either in the city or around the city, where kids are out there, playing lacrosse or playing baseball. So you had mentioned passive, I think was the word I heard a couple of times. And I think we shouldn't completely dismiss some level of that kind of a little more active use. But for me, again, speaking solely for myself, I hope the vast majority of it, we're able to keep it a lot like it is. It's beautiful. People really enjoy getting out there and running and walking and riding their bicycle and all of those things. And I think it's really important that we keep that. It is, an opportunity for people to go out and really connect with nature. There's, a lot of deer running around out there and birds and stuff. And I don't want to drive too much of that away. So I think it's a balancing act. Maybe where if we do some of those active features, we're selective where they go, and they're close, so they're not disturbing the rest of the property. As far as using those buildings, personally, I think it would be a challenge to use the old clubhouse facility. I'm not, I haven't gone through it. I'm not a structural engineer, but my suspicion is that thing's going to require a boatload of work to get that thing into some type of usable space. And we may have to at least look at what it might look like taking that down as an option. The Durbin House, different story. There's some historic value there potentially. I think knocking that down is, for me, I'd be pretty opposed to that. But by the same token, we've got to look at what, the fiscal part of it is and weigh that against what our options are. So that's all I have, Mr. President. Thank you for giving me that little bit of time to talk, and I'll shut up now and give everybody else an opportunity.
All right, certainly. Thank you, Mr. Cavacci. Mr. Stone, did you have a chance as a part of your visits over there to take any kind of a look at the 2 buildings?
So we walked around them. We didn't go in them, but did see kind of up close. And I was actually thinking about those this morning, and I think there is an opportunity there. Obviously, you got to examine the building to find out if it's structurally sound and if it can be reused. But I mean, there could be an opportunity to reuse those in some way. I mean, it's an existing facility. If you don't reuse it, it's just going to be a nuisance, and eventually you're going to have to tear it down. That's something that we'll look at to some level in the master plan. The master plan is mainly about the site itself, but you've got that building there that some consideration has to be given to that. So.
Right. Yeah, I would encourage you to work with the staff to get inside and maybe take a look, and we value your opinion on the building status and what opportunities you think there might be to include it in any planning for the park. Anyone else like to be heard?
Mr. President,
Ms. Gilbert.
if I could throw in my 2 cents, shall
Certainly.
we say? So in general, I am pretty much for what you've kind of highlighted here with the linear and nonlinear ideas, and the passive park thoughts. I'm not seriously jumping up and down about a dog park or equestrian access. I'm not seeing horses walking through the park at all, and then someone coming behind as runners and bikers. I'm just not seeing that be a useful space for those two, but that's a personal thing. I would like to also see the Durbin House and the clubhouse at least being addressed. And if the clubhouse can't be used, then let's get rid of it. Because I think the whole park as a whole needs to definitely be refreshed and updated. And I'd love to see a possibility of a environmental education area. I don't know if that's a potential. I don't know if that's in the plan. I see that you talk about wildlife viewing and bird watching and habitat restoration, and we've got the bees and the pollinators, and it all kind of ties together a little bit, and I would hope also lends to maybe the passive thought. The playground for the disabled, make it an all-inclusive playground. That's just, again, a personal thing that I think we don't have a lot of. I know a lot of our playgrounds around are really new, and we're updating many of them, and most of them are, I think they do tend to highlight those that have some sort of disability, but I would love to see a wonderful all-inclusive playground for the disabled and maybe even the elderly, kind of. I don't know. I know playgrounds go in many thoughts and directions nowadays. Fishing. Oh my gosh, the ponds are wonderful out there. I'd love to see a nice pier and nice fishing access. I see you have a question mark on kayak. Can I ask why?
Really the only question there is there, and that was just as we were putting together a list, we kind of threw a question mark after there because we weren't sure how big the ponds actually were. And when you actually get out there and see them, some of them are fairly good size. They do know they dry up, they tend to dry up throughout the course of the year and then kind of get refilled as rain comes. But there are a couple, especially as you get up to the top end of the site. There's a larger one up there that potentially could be used for kayaking. And it's really a matter of, well, if you have kayak access, you got to have a way to get kayaks there. And then just the liability that goes along with kayaks and water type things.
And then the only other thing I see in Carroll County is of short supply is a larger shelter that can be rented, and I see that's even on here. That you can use the grill, that there's a restroom, that there's actually even a refrigerator, or something that there just is not a space in Carroll County where, say, a larger business can have an annual picnic, or even a large family can really go and literally wash their hands. King Park is the only space, other than one other park in Tawnytown that I know of, there might be something new out there now, that you can actually access that. And I think that would be a huge benefit and also a source of income for us if we could provide that to not only people in Westminster, but Carroll County. as a place, you know, just for family gatherings. Because who wants bad, deviled eggs?
All right, thank you, Ms. Gilbert.
There you go.
Mr.
Anyone
President,
else? Who haven't we heard from? Mr. Yingling, anything you'd like to share, or?
Yeah, I'm still writing some notes down. So if Councilman Dayoff would like to chime in again, then I'm fine with that.
Right, or we have not heard from the mayor. If the mayor would like to express any thoughts as well.
Sure, Mr. President. First, I'd just like to ask you if we go ahead with Councilman Gilbert's suggestion. Would we have the state or the country's first playground for the elderly? I think I know what you meant, but I don't know. That's not what I pictured at first.
I phrased it terribly, but I hope you know what I meant for that.
Well,
as equipment, something like that.
Ms. Gilbert says that, but actually, in a conversation with the folks at Carroll Lutheran Village at one time, I think they actually expressed some interest in sort of blending the area that they're supposed to get on into whatever happens there as a recreational area for some of their population. So
Right.
there are possible opportunities to work with the village to create a place where the residents there could have some recreational activities.
No, I think it's good as long as it's more along the lines of a walking trail and less along the lines of also the world's biggest, slide. No, I think I had some questions, but everyone's already asked them. So everyone's already brought up the points. I think we kind of went down pretty much every point here so far. So that's all I have.
So I'm pleased to see that we're looking at this passive park idea. I think that that as a way to look at most of the property there is probably going to be largely in keeping with what the surrounding communities would like. I think a lot of my colleagues here have made some good points. I particularly agree with Ms. Gilbert. I think that one thing we want to do, although I think that we want to be aware of the fact that it is sort of surrounded by neighborhoods, and that a lot of folks on the west side of town are going to be amongst the principal users. I want us to think of this as a park for all of Westminster.
Right.
And even if you have to get in your car because you live somewhere out on the east side of town to get over there, or maybe there's a bus that takes you over there, I think that we still want to have it be a place that all city residents find attractive and a good place to go and visit and enjoy. We don't want to create a situation where we have large crowds coming in and disrupting the neighborhood, obviously. But I think that there are clearly some ways to do this. One thing I was curious about is how we connect the trail that we have, the Wakefield Valley Fenby trail, to the opportunity to walk through Wakefield, the Wakefield Valley Park, as I guess it would become. Have you given that any thought yet? Have you identified any easy opportunities for that, or?
So we've started to look at that a little bit. We need to study it a little more, but obviously there's access potentially along Tahoma Farm Road, but it'd be ideal to have something a little more creative than just a sidewalk connecting the two. So that's something we can, we'll be taking a closer look at that as we go through this. But yeah, that is something to be considered.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Anybody like to express on this?
I have a follow-up, but I'll wait for Ben first.
All right.
Yeah. So, no, this is all very good information. Appreciate it. My kind of biggest question, and I'm going to go back to the conversations that I had with the task force members before I was elected. Is, we have this piece of property, and all the task force members said in the beginning of their conversations, at least they relayed to me, that they would like to see this property generate revenue. And I'm just wondering how it can generate revenue, because from kind of what I see here, and maybe I'm not as creative as some people, like none of this is going to create revenue. And revenue creation can be to invest in kind of the other like greener areas or passive areas of the park. So for example, like pavilions or, improving the trail structures and everything. So I just like to kind of throw that out there is, what activities can we put on this property to generate some revenue to improve the property that we have? And that would be my thought. And I'm not seeing any kind of discussion on that unless I'm missing something.
May I follow up on that?
Yeah,
he-
sure.
Ben does provide a good point, although in the list I do see the potential for the adaptive or use of the clubhouse, but there's also the area of the solar panels, and I'm not sure to what degree that or what area you're talking about for that. I'm sure that could produce some sort of revenue. I want to see most of that land. I like personally going to that piece of property, walking it with my dog or by myself, and enjoying the sights that are there, the leaves, the nature, and it being a passive area to actually think and get back to just a quiet time. I know, we've all had plenty of quiet time during COVID. I think a lot of us have, and many of us, I think, have come to realize that was maybe even a piece of our world that we had lost. So having and developing a park, at least in my perspective, that highlights some of the old traditional things that we used to do, and that includes a playground and maybe frisbee golf, but having the ability to do yoga and to watch the flowers and the bees and sit on a park bench and talk to your child or your grandchild. There's not a lot of that out there. We're lucky we live in Carroll County with a lot of it, but for a lot of people in other areas, they don't have that ability and they don't see that. And as our farmlands and as a lot of the things are disappearing to housing developments, I think in the future we're going to see less of it. So I don't know. I get Councilman Yangling's focus on we don't want to have property just sit there, but sometimes we end up with a far more greater benefit of open space and other uses of property than just the cash and the fiscal note, although maybe there's a little piece of this property we can do something with.
So can I?
But that's just
Mr. Ealing, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to also just follow up with a couple things about it. And look, I totally understand. I'm in the minority here when it comes to this opinion, but I think I owe it to my constituents, that I need to cite this kind of stuff is, if you go back to what was proposed, okay, that Mr. Cavacci said that, we kind of went in a different direction. That proposal was essentially like a sketch on a napkin. And in fact, in August 10th of 2016, the task force unanimously recommended to give a favorable recommendation to the Pinkert and Looking Glass Gardens Lavender Farm. And they weren't even given really a chance to even modify that sketch on a napkin. I mean, I remember watching that video of, all the people that showed up that were so upset about water slides and everything. So, I'm not suggesting that we go down that route, but I truly believe that if there was a company willing to, come in and invest that type of money, of course, it doesn't sound like that was really the right approach, of what they were exactly looking to do. But I tend to, lean towards, again, that there is a lot of opportunity here to have an more of an active type of park that is, not going to, we want to bring in like tens and thousands of people. I understand that. And I have a lot of empathy for the residents. They don't want to have that. I get that. But it's like, where's the healthy balance? And, because, having that spot not only generate revenue and have some people come to that spot will also benefit like the other businesses around town and, have an influx of economic activity to our city. And so like, where is that balance? I understand I'm probably the majority here. In the minority here. But really that is my position. It's like, where's the balance between active and passive that we can also, have a great influx, reasonable influx of economic activity. This site, I think, is it's primed for that. So I just want to make sure to get that out there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ealing. Anything else that anybody anyone else like to be heard on?
I have one more
thoughts?
And I promise I'll be quiet after that. I always wonder whether this property wouldn't be a great location for a larger farmer's market, for a regular pavilion or a bit regular spot. I don't know, you guys, I'm just throwing this out there. None of you may even agree with this, but it is out in our kind of our farmy area. We have a farmer's market. It's downtown right now. We could always use to expand it. Could we have a physical structure in some area with a great parking lot, that we could use? I don't know. Just throwing that out there. I don't know. Thoughts on that, if you like.
Mr. President.
Mr. Mayor.
So I think that I guess I have more to say after Councilman Yingling and Councilman Gilbert or Councilwoman Gilbert spoke, because I don't envision something big there. But it wasn't that long ago that some of you wanted to put a indoor-outdoor pool there. Now we've invested money in the pool we have now, and so that's off the table. And that wasn't something I thought was the best use for it, but it was an option at the time, and we've kind of run the gamut on what could go there. But I think it's important to I'm for green space. I think that we should have green space. That could mean a lot of things, but I think it is really the last large green area in the city, and we should do something green with it. But that could be a lot of things. So I'm fairly open-minded in that realm. But to Councilman Yingling's point, what does a passive park cost the city? And are there things we can include in a passive park that helps minimize the impact, the financial impact? Because I think, I think things like this that are good are always a good idea, unless they come with a consequence later down the road, like having to raise taxes or having to cut spending somewhere else because of it. So if there's a way we can have the passive park, but have some things built into it that create revenue, I think that's something we should certainly consider. And the farmers market, I would just like to bring up one thing, and I know that you're kind of thinking on the spur of the moment here, Councilwoman Gilbert, but one of the important purposes that the farmers market serves, and one of the things I've looked at over the past few years, is its ability to bring people from outside the city into the city that leave the farmers market and do something else here, whether that's get lunch, go to a cafe, swing by a retail store. I've looked at where we could actually move it within the city to help. I don't like that people have to cross 27. I'd like to be somewhere where they don't have to do that. And the natural thing to do is walk a block over and get a bite to eat. I think moving something like that to a place like Wakefield would have consequences, regarding that I don't think would be positive. So just to bring that up, and maybe there's some good consequences I'm not thinking of, but I just, in case people weren't thinking about that, that's something that's been on my mind a lot lately. And, we would like to, keep the farmers market open longer, do things like that so that it can spur more economic activity downtown. That's my opinion on that, but that's it, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. President. I wonder if we could take a look at some additional access off of Old New Windsor Road down at the other end. I would like to do something a little bit better about access. And down there by the barn on the other end, I've often thought that that would be a great opportunity to provide some additional access and make the park just a little bit more available. I would also, I guess I'd like to do something, maybe we're overdue to have maybe an engineer study of the conference center, so we can make a decision as to whether or not we remove the building or try to do something with it. And I have an open mind as to whether or not we remove the building. I would like to clean that area up. I would really like to clean that area up. And I'm all for passive use. I think Mr. Pecoraro said at one point in time in the past, and I wholeheartedly agree with Mr. Pecoraro and Mr. Cavacci, this is a legacy issue. And I think open space, passive open space in the middle of Westminster, as 50 years from now, 75 years from now, as the Westminster New Windsor area increasingly become urbanized, I think it's going to be a very positive legacy open space issue. I would also really love to connect it with the Wakefield Valley Trail. And I've pondered that on a number of occasions as to how it is that we could do that. So I think the big issues for me are what in the world are we going to do with the conference center? Access off of Old New Windsor Road at the other end. I'm all for looking at passive uses, and disposition of the conference center and the Durbin House. The Durbin House we can't do much about. There are some uses that have been discussed in the past, and I have an open mind about that. But whether we keep the conference center or we let it go, I'd like to go ahead and make a decision about it, because it's quite an eyesore there. So I've been told that it's structurally sound by some other folks, and yet to look at it, it doesn't really seem like it's structurally sound. And maybe the use of it as a conference center in the future is not necessarily what we have in mind for the park, for the park area. So I mean, that's something we may need to explore. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Well, anyone else wish to express anything we haven't heard yet, or any other questions?
I guess, Mr. President, my comment more than a question. I think one thing we need to keep in mind is ultimately we're going to see this again, because anything that's ultimately going to happen out there is going to come through this body in the end. So we're certainly going to the buck will stop here eventually. So hopefully, when we see this return, we'll have some good choices to make.
Couldn't agree
Mr.
more.
Stone, I was wondering if you could outline for us what the plans are for public input, soliciting public input as you go forward with looking at options.
Abby, do you want to address that?
Sure. Sorry, I was taking some notes. We actually have 3 public meetings planned, and it was decided that it would be best as an iterative process, whereby the first public meeting, and Pete and I are actually planning to have a conversation about the structure and function of the very first public meeting at the end of this meeting this evening. So Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, but the first public meeting will very much be modeled after this particular meeting this evening, where it's information gathering. It's reaching out to the general public, and it's understanding where their thoughts and ideas are on possible uses and plans for the property itself. And I believe we may be going into that first public input meeting with a plan, a general site plan. Pete, is that right?
Yep. Yeah, something. I mean, definitely not final and all dressed up and ready to go, but something where we've done some initial analysis and started to kind of identify certain areas of the site that could be used for certain activities. So we're not going to go in with a blank slate and just have people give us all kinds of ideas at that meeting. We want to have something to kind of direct the conversation.
Okay, and you don't have a date selected for that yet, do you, Ms. Gruber?
We actually, December 16th, I believe.
Okay, great. December 16th.
Is that correct, Pete?
Yes.
Okay.
I thank Mr. Dayhoff.
Well, we have an opportunity to take a look at whatever it is that Mr. Stone wants to present to the public, because ultimately this body here is going to be held responsible for whatever it is that's proposed. So I would like to have an opportunity to look at it before it goes to a public hearing.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea if we
Yeah,
could.
I feel pretty strongly about that.
Ms. Gruber, you'll keep that in mind?
Yes. Actually, how would you like that handled? Would you
would-
prefer that they come to you during a preceding council meeting, or is it a briefing that you'd like sent through email? What would be your preference for
Why
that
don't we,
exchange?
if it's possible, if the timing works out, why don't we plan on having a brief presentation on that at the council meeting prior to the public meeting?
Okay.
And we get a chance to see it and offer some thoughts, and then we'll get a chance to put it out there for some public input.
So for that, for the scenario of the December 16th meeting, we would be looking at a council meeting of December 14th, which would then only give us 2 days to revise anything that we were planning to present. So should we back it up then to which would be the November 23rd meeting, which would be our next.
Which is pretty quick.
Mhm.
I don't know that you're going to have the time to do that.
Mr.
Mr.
President,
Clark.
can I suggest something? So I think we keep it on the 14th, but obviously there's a council packet that's going to come out the Thursday before that. I think maybe what we would ask is that you put some information in that council packet that gives us time to review it, and maybe give you some feedback via email on an individual basis. We certainly can't have any extemporaneous, group decisions, but we certainly on an individual basis could send a couple of quick notes and say, hey, I think this is great, or hey, I really have a beef with that. That would at least give you a little bit of time to maybe at least have some thoughts towards when we have the 14th meeting. And then, it gives you 2 days to sort of massage some things. I don't think we're talking about a complete rework. My suspicion would be that ultimately we're maybe going to try to give a little bit of constructive guidance or criticism, because again, I want to make sure that, Council Member Dayhoff's point is taken. We're ultimately going to hold the bag for this in the end. And it won't be anybody else but the 6 of us that either gets the heat or the accolades, or a little bit of both, for whatever we end up ultimately doing. So we want to make sure that we're part of the process along the way, but not in a stifling manner. Because I understand that you're sitting there thinking, my God, if I got to wrangle the 6 of these guys constantly, we're never going to get this thing done. So I think we can be sensitive to that and try to help the process without being a hindrance.
Mr. President.
Keep in mind too,
Mr. Mayor.
we got 3 meetings scheduled.
Right?
So, and the idea is to kind of continuously be working and improving the plan as we get through the process. So this isn't just the meeting on the 16th is not kind of the final product by any means.
Mayor?
Yeah, well, first of all, so let me address that, Mr. Stone. I don't think we're worried about that. I think what we're I don't want to say worried about, but what we have to be cautious of is, once there's a public meeting, all these meetings are public, right? But once there's a public meeting like that, it doesn't matter what our intentions are, whatever is said at that meeting without us there is going to get it's going to be public and people are going to talk about it, and that's how rumors start. So we want to make sure whatever is presented at that meeting is at least somewhat supported by the council and myself. So it's not that we're worried about like whatever happens at that meeting is going to determine what happens at Wakefield, but we would like to be able to put our energy into making a smart and a thoughtful decision, Wakefield, and not dispelling rumors that are untrue. So just to let you know kind of what our thoughts are. I feel like I can speak for most of us on that one. I try not to speak for people, but I think we're all thinking that. So, but really quick, to Councilman Cavacci, I know that we're trying to work with the timeline here. Your suggestion is certainly a way to do that. My fear with a couple of days between getting the council packet and then our meeting, getting emails from individuals on the council and myself could cause problems maybe with staff and our consultant, because they may not all be the same suggestions. And if we disagree, so I think that maybe, I know we're trying to work within the timeline that's already set, but there might be a better way. I think maybe we either have to have a special meeting, in my opinion, or delay something that's already there, briefly, just so we can make this work. I know we don't want to do that, but I don't see another way that we can do this right.
Well, let's look at it this way, Mr. Stone. I mean, look, we're not trying to rush your process. We want you to do a good job and give it the thought that it needs. If you're planning on having a public meeting on the 16th, when did you think you would have, some kind of a plan developed prior to that?
We'd be looking at having at least a draft of what we plan to have on the 16th out a week prior, so that.
All right. So then we don't need to figure it out right now, but why don't we work with you and Ms. Gruber and Ms. Matthews to figure out if we can schedule. I think the mayor's suggestion is a good one. And certainly these days we're all a lot more flexible about getting together since we can do it virtually. See if we can schedule something in advance that will give you enough time between talking with us and when the public meeting would be to make any, what I would imagine would probably be relatively minor revisions before your public meeting. Is that acceptable to everybody?
Yeah. Mr. President and Mr. Stone, I have a question. I know that we've said that there are going to be public meetings. I'm assuming due to COVID, they're going to be Zoom meetings. And how, I guess my question and concern is, for the public, how are they going to know that these meetings can have public input? Because you really can't, I'm just curious how their comments and their input, as opposed to being an in-person meeting, people were going to be showing up in a room and listening to a presentation. So how are we going to do that in our virtual world, or are we having an in-person meeting? I just want to make sure the public knows and is aware of what's going on and how that's going to be addressed.
Good question.
Abby, do you want to address that?
That's a great question.
So at our kickoff meeting, we had discussed a combination of some Zoom meetings, and then additionally, we did discuss the ability to perhaps facilitate some in-person meetings where we could maintain physical distancing. So that was something that Mr. Stone and I were going to have a discussion about this evening, sort of what the form and function of those meetings would look like, considering the constraints that we're under right now because of the pandemic. So
yeah, and just to revise. Yes.
I wonder.
I personally, if it's possible, I think in-person meetings would be great. But
I wonder if we can't reach out to the homeowners association and talk to them about how to move forward with making a presentation.
Mr. President.
Cavacci.
So, I'm honestly, I don't think we should be doing this by Zoom, period. This is a 50, 150 year decision
Right.
that we're making. And to make this decision in a pandemic when we can't get the input from the public in person and have a dialogue with people, I think is a mistake. And I didn't even think about that, Councilwoman Gilbert, until you brought it up. But I don't see how Zoom is anything other than just a presentation, which maybe that's okay for the very first one. So at least people know what some of the thoughts are. But I would be very reluctant to move forward in the end without having some in-person opportunities for the public to have their input. And if that means it can't happen for months, well, then it just doesn't happen for months, because we're making a decision here that is, as we've all learned, cathedral thinking. And to do it in a rush to judgment because of this situation, I think is a mistake.
I agree.
Right.
Well-
So why don't we let Ms. Gruber and Mr. Stone come back to us with their thoughts on how they plan to manage this. I think Ms. Gruber certainly is very aware that we're interested in a lot of public notice and public input on this, because we certainly had a lot of conversations about it over the last few years. Let's let them come back to us rather than try and figure it out right now, with some suggestions on how to proceed. And we'll have the opportunity certainly to make sure that as part of that we're ensuring the kind of public input that we want to make sure we create the opportunity for. So they were gonna have some conversation about it. Let's let them give us their plan. That's agreeable to everybody. But I agree. I think those things are very important, and Zoom meetings are going to be challenging to do that. So we'll all look forward to hearing how it can work out. Anything else on this? Okay, well, we will look forward to hearing back from the staff on when we can plan on getting together for a look at their first take on this. And we will, I think Mr. Stone made a good point. This is an iterative effort. We're going to see some concepts that will have to get discussed and modified along the way, and we'll keep an open mind on how these things go forward. I think he's got a lot of things to synthesize from what he heard from all of us tonight, and I wish him well with that. And we'll look forward to how it turns out when we get together in a few weeks.
One footnote,
Mr. Dehoff.
May we be provided a copy of the PowerPoint?
Sure we can ask for that, certainly.
PDF's fine.
Great. Yeah, Abby, if you can take care of getting that distributed, that'd be great.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. All right. Anything else on this then tonight? All right, well then we'll just wrap up as we always do. We always say at during these virtual meetings that the final item on our agenda, as it is in in-person meetings, is citizen comments. When we invite comments from the public on any issues on tonight's agenda or any other city issues. As we've already noted, it's difficult to allow live comments online during meetings like this. And since we're doing it this way, we still want to encourage people to share their thoughts with us. We invite comments to be sent to our city clerk at comments@westgov.com. And at this time in every meeting, I will read out all of the comments we have received since the last meeting. So please, if you have thoughts on what you've heard tonight or any other concerns, please do not hesitate to share them at comments@westgov.com. And that concludes our agenda and the meeting. And without objection, we are adjourned until our next regular meeting, which will be on November 23rd. So thank you all very much, and stay safe. Take care.